From ZTN Studios in Harare, Zimbabwe, welcome to the Mint Special. Our discussion, financing SDGs in the face of COVID-19, business and diaspora investment as catalysts for sustainable development goals. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network ZTN and our partners, the Poverty Reduction Forum Trust, PRFT. Hello, I'm Andy Hodges. Now, PRFT has been running a series of programs discussing the financing for SDGs in the face of COVID-19 programs. The first episode on the 28th of April focused on the options for financing for sustainable development goals in the face of COVID-19. The program highlighted some of the progress that had been made towards achieving SDGs, financing mechanisms for SDGs in Zimbabwe, and challenges and opportunities as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The second program covers the implications of Zimbabwe's SDG financing mechanism on inequalities and the widening inequality gap as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the third and final program on SDG financing, we are focusing today on the role of business and diaspora remittances in financing sustainable development goals. This episode will look at the role played by business in financing SDGs, including during this time of COVID-19. Business is crucial in achieving SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth and SDG 9 on industry, innovation and infrastructure. The program will also look at the SDGs prioritized by business and the existing partnerships between business, government and other stakeholders. Additionally, the program seeks to understand the policy framework necessary for business to contribute towards the achievement of SDGs, including the recent policy pronouncements by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, including the COVID-19 Economic Recovery and Stimulus Package. There is the issue of the recently announced moratorium on prices and the possible outcomes of such measures. Lots to discuss. As we look at the prospect of both business and diaspora remittances being negatively affected by COVID-19, the government has begun exploring a number of policy options to limit the damage caused by the pandemic. These included the reprioritization of the 2020 budget and the 18 billion Zimbabwe dollars COVID-19 Economic Recovery and Stimulus Package. We'll also look at measures that have been made so far and potential options or fiscal incentives that the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development can consider to further stimulate the economy. The program will seek to identify incentives to attract diaspora remittances, especially during these times of uncertainty. There's also a need to look at the SDG financing framework for SDGs as the ministry develops the National Development Strategy 1, NDS1, which is the successor to the Transitional Stabilization Plan, TSP. This includes the mechanisms for citizens' participation in the development of NDS1, especially the marginalized communities, and also ensuring the social sectors are adequately financed. Now, joining us on the Mint Special today to discuss financing SDGs in the face of COVID-19, business and diaspora investment for catalysts for SDGs. We are joined in the studio by Artwell Gonisi, Poverty Reduction Forum Trust Programs Coordinator, Daniel Sam, Project Manager and Head of the Migration and Development Unit at the International Organization for Migration, and Chris Mugaga, Chief Executive Officer at the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Gentlemen, welcome to the Mint Special.
Thank you.
Let's leap straight into this. Of course, if you have any comments or views on our show today, please contact us via our Facebook page, Zim Papers TV Network, or via our Twitter handle at ZTN News. Now, Artwell, could you briefly just give us an overview of the government's response to COVID-19 and the impact this will have on SDGs financing in Zimbabwe?
Thank you, Andy. A good welcome to our viewers. I think since the pandemic started, we've seen our government introducing a number of measures. Firstly, starting with declaring the pandemic a state of disaster. I think that was on the 20th of March. And this was followed by lockdown measures, which have been revised as time has progressed. And again, I think another way was also the restrictions in terms of our borders, ensuring that only cargo and returning residents are coming, and issues of isolation and other measures. These were to contain the COVID-19 pandemic and also in line with the WHO recommendations. Then coming to economic measures, I think the first one was the 500 million a package for fighting COVID, a Zim dollar package for fighting COVID, introduced by the Minister of Finance, and as well as the reprioritization of the budget. I think we heard the Minister saying that some of the expenditure will be delayed, especially capital expenditure projects will be delayed, and ministries were asked to reprioritize their budgets. Then we also had, just prior to the lockdown, we had a relaxation of exchange controls, where now foreign currency is allowed to be used. And another measure that came out was the safety nets that were introduced by government, 200 million initially. I think 200 million for each
per month now, right?
Yeah, per month, yeah, for each household. Then we had the big one, the 18 billion package, which was recently announced. And this one is, I think, is broader, covering both the economic sectors as well as the social sectors.
And of course, not to forget social distancing, as we are here in the studio. That's critical. Someone then once told me that our lives have changed forever going forward. Yes, right, Chris. You heard Artwell talk about the 18 billion. Now, let's look at that. Government said 72% of the 18 billion package was meant for reviving production and business, 28% going towards health. I look at the business aspects, 3 billion or just over working capital fund. You've got 1 billion for mining, 2.4 food grants, and of course, broad relief measures, 1.5 billion. Of course, the question is that enough, particularly for business revival? What needs to be done? There's more need to be done to protect business and particularly jobs, because a lot of that money is about jobs. And of course, the big question is, where's the money coming from?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we had managed to look at fellow countries. We had also managed to introduce such packages. You look at the USA, you look at the neighboring South Africa. I think for South Africa, we're talking of about 500 billion rand. But of the 500 billion, just to contextualize, you're seeing only about 130 billion rands will be funded through the 2020 budget for the South African government, with the remainder either coming through the Bretton Woods institutions or the Unemployment Insurance Fund. For Zimbabwe, I think just a mere look at, for example, the financial soundness indicators. I was looking at numbers up to December. You're looking at total loans and advances sitting at average 2.16 billion.
Yeah, that's all.
And vis-a-vis a guaranteed government of 18 billion, naturally, I think on paper it looks like a small figure, but in relative to the national balance sheet, it's no mean figure by any stretch of imagination. So you see our submissions as Chamber of Commerce. For quite some time, we had done a paper on sustainable and realistic interventions in the midst of COVID, where our focus has been much more on the tax reprieve, can we say. I thought maybe to count up to the 18 billion, there will be quite a number of tax breaks and reprieve for most of our members' businesses, how we are feeling the effect. I think Zimbabwe is a good case study of how direct just funding of activities might not be the solution. If the environment is toxic, what then it means is it's a leakage on its own, no matter how much you pour into the economy. We look back to even the DIMA facility, you could be aware of it. It had been put before business when they were intended to benefit. A lot of leakages were experienced. So to us, the debate is not on whether 18 billion or the 3 billion you are mentioning is enough or not. What could be more important to us is how do we push the policy environment, especially the barriers to business growth we have been seeing for years? How can we relax them? Start with the tax issue I'm mentioning. The catatonic policy uncertainty. I think if you look at the rate at which we had seen business feeling the impact, waste of statutory instruments impacting on making decisions in the country, if that is removed, you'll see even the 3 billion might not be that much important.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you talked about that because we've seen in the past that you could have as much money thrown at the problem as you like, but it needs to get to the intended beneficiaries, and it needs to get to what it's intended for. So, if, for example, the money is used to revive production, which makes a lot of sense in our economy now, and in fact, even pre-COVID, that was what we're talking about. We need to ensure the money gets to the right people, and also, I suppose, because is business involved in discussing the modalities of the 18 billion? Were you consulted in any way at all?
Obviously, as I'm referring to a paper we submitted through the Line Ministry of Industry and Commerce, the issue obviously we will not necessarily possibly expect verbatim in terms of government's approach to the issue. But maybe I continue emphasizing to say, to us, the trick is not on the stock subject of the money. Because people look at money from a variable stock to say because it's 3 billion, it should be enough. But you realize, given the dynamics and the confidence deficit we see in the market, even if it was a 10 billion you were throwing around, maybe the trick was not going to be realized. That's why you see I overemphasize on the ecosystem, the environment itself, more than the 3 billion. However, we are not somehow degrading or demeaning the need for the money. But if the money is to come and leakages are found, wrong beneficiaries of the money, and also the policy environment,
then it won't be effective in spending.
The next thing, there's a wrong policy.
Yeah. In fact, you know, Daniel, I want to talk to you because IOM supports communities highly impacted by mobility, migration, and natural disasters to become more resilient, which includes their ability to withstand the impacts of hazards, shocks, and stresses in future. And I mean, this does take money, and let's be clear. I mean, it does take education, of course, and programs being out there, which your organization does, but it also takes money. So this stimulus package doesn't really look at any sort of disasters coming up or any monies in that for migrants in terms of that 18 billion budget. What would be your comments?
Thank you very much, and also thank you for your submissions, which upon those premises I've also built the case. Talking about disasters and other catastrophes that affect countries. You know, every country has its own plan. We draw up development plans. But what IOM actually, as an organization, we have kind of operational frameworks that we help our member states also to deal with. And most often, within these operational frameworks, we have crisis response as one of the pillars or the domains, which speaks to the fact that once we are on this planet, there could be some kind of emergencies. So we tend to assist government in the pursuit of advancing the migration management. We look at also mobility challenges and then also issues like you're talking about crisis. So for us, we have also been looking at like what comes in, for example, from the diaspora. So having looked at all these, we tend to talk about how government will also mobilize resources. Of course, we don't have that kind of residual funds. So as an organization, we work with our partners, the donor community, and then the UN entity, also to mobilize or fundraise. You understand my point? Because once we draw this crisis response action plan with the government, you need to cost them. Yeah, so crisis come, we do the needs assessment on the ground, and then we look at ways and means that we can also fundraise to meet the challenges, which most often than not also involve migration challenges. You know, I mean, COVID has presented us with
another challenge.
Yeah, another challenge.
They were there before.
Yes, yeah.
What were the main challenges that you found? I mean, in Zimbabwe in particular, in terms of your migration under IOM?
Well, like any other country, every country, if you put it in context, has its own migration challenges. When it comes to migration, we always say that migration will always happen. You can't stop people from moving so far as we have the social demographics going on. Migration is also necessary, I mean, for development. And then, but what we always say is that if you manage migration and manage it well, it becomes very desirable. That's why in our pursuit in supporting member states, we look into how best we can situate our programs within development agenda of the member state or the government. And then once we look at it, looking at the thematic area, I mean, then we situate it within a particular ministry. Once we do that, then it calls for capacity building or institutional strengthening. So that has been our modus operandi in terms of helping member states in there. So we look into issues of policies, which are guidelines to look into areas of concern. For example, talking about the issue of COVID now, the pandemic. Now you have to mobilize the relevant partners. Of course, this issue or this pandemic is affecting all the spectrum, but you tend to look at the lead ministry. So once we situate the issue, we get the lead ministry. We have also the inter-ministerial committee on migration, so which Ministry of Home Affairs is the chair of this. But like now we're talking about issues that has to do with Zimbabweans coming in and the issue of migrants. We speaking to Ministry of Health and Childcare, speaking to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade. There is a particular directorate that deals with diaspora issues, Zimbabwe Diaspora Directorate, which is also located within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. Okay. So, if you look at the whole thing, we are all concerned. You understand my point? That is why with IOM we believe in, once you bring out the policies, what do you do in terms of strengthening? You do the institutional coordination in terms of the thematic areas that you're looking at. Then you capacitate. Then don't forget about data. Data is very key. I mean, these are evidence-based. You can't just say how many people have come from.
You need to have statistics.
Yeah, you need to have statistics. So we've been also working with Zimstat in that area, supporting us in the area of migration data.
Now, I will say, you're right. I mean, migrants can play a huge economic benefit. In fact, the United States of America is a nation of migration, is it not? So that gives you a good example of how good migration is good for any economy. But also on the other side, you know, PRFT, of course, an organization charged with mandating or influencing the formulation and implementation of pro-poor policies. But if I had to look at the 18 billion, okay, is there any pro-poor money in there for those least advantaged in our community?
Okay, I would say that when we look at the 18 billion, we see there is the 2.8 billion, I think, earmarked for small-scale farmers and vulnerable farmers, which is a good thing. Then we have also seen that there is 2.4 billion for food relief, although obviously it's not adequate, but it's a good starting point. Then obviously the development partners are also chipping in terms of providing food relief and stuff. Then we have also the 500 million, which is targeted at the small SMEs. I think maybe that could have been increased a bit, given that they were the most affected when you look at the SMEs during this pandemic. And also looking at our figures, as almost 70% are employed in the SME sector and informal sector. So you would expect naturally to see more funding going towards...
Yeah, because the informal sector, I mean, your own numbers, you're right. Say 70-80% of our population is in the informal sector. Yeah. And they're not really, there isn't really a amount of money put aside, a large amount of money put aside for them, which could be an issue.
Yes, so I thought maybe the 500 could have been increased a bit. Then we also look at the health sector. There's 1 billion. My expectation was that out of that 18 billion, you would see a huge chunk going towards the health sector, given our challenges, the existing challenges that are already there in terms of we can't keep on outsourcing to development partners. As a country, we also need to ensure that our health sector is adequately funded. And I thought maybe that's one area that needed strengthening. Then obviously it also comes to how that 18 billion is going to be financed. From what we have heard so far, I understand 120 US million is coming from grants, and another portion is coming from the reprioritized budget.
And I heard recently the Afrexim Bank may have come up with a $300 million US facility as well.
Yeah, and the other one obviously is now coming from debt. So when you look at it from that point, if you look at what Chris also highlighted earlier, to say that yes, we understand the need for supporting business, it's understandable. But also, given that this money is coming through debt, we also should ensure that there are mechanisms in place that ensure that that money is rightly utilized, and we plug on the leakages that I think we have seen before in terms of other facilities.
Yeah, Chris, the 18 billion went towards 72%, as I said, reviving production. Okay, now CZI, Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, estimates capacity utilization during the lockdown period around 20% or just north of that, and down from 68% pre-lockdown. So, of course, what specifically needs to be done for business to increase production post-COVID? I mean, very quickly.
Yeah, I think what's more important also in the context of the capacity utilization, let's appreciate that the most hard-hit sectors, you look at the tourism travel, the average figure will even be so misleading when you refer to it, because we are seeing single figures, if not an industry coming to a halt or a standstill. I don't know how to even avoid using the word 18 billion for the simple reason that the debate and conundrum on the exchange rate discussion in Zimbabwe, it leaves me willing to look at maybe at most 400 million US dollars we are talking of. But domestically, like my colleagues are saying, we are too weak. The fiscal vulnerabilities of the economy, we can't afford to support from domestically. In carrying a debt, the level of prudence and accountability I think it's something we look forward to. But you get the message from business. Our focus has not been much on just accessing the funding, which we are not sure how and when it's going to come. It's an issue we are so worried about. But to us, what makes funding meaningful is a function of the cost of the fund, the tenure of the facility itself, and when it's going to be availed. These are all issues we are quite interested in as private sector. That's why you see the overemphasis or the whole fuss about the amount to us is disproportionate to the requirements of what we are looking at. What we want is to see institutions being quite very accountable. What we want to see is funds being allocated to the right departments. In fact, the major challenge from our SNAP service within the Chamber of Commerce, we had learned that the biggest cancer we had been having is not necessarily that lack of funding, which is the reason why most banks are smiling every day to look at the non-performing loans down. Why? Because the appetite for advances has been low. What we want are markets. Secondly, but to markets, the risk now, I think you are seeing the character of deglobalization. Everyone wants to look inwards. 1 July, we're talking of operationalizing the ACFTA. I'm not sure with COVID if in the next 18 months anyone will be interested in that discussion. But it's business. We are looking at markets as a more reliable factor of production, more than the capital we continue even referring to.
Now, Chris did talk about transparency and accountability. I think it's very important as well, because mechanisms that government has put in place to ensure there is transparency and accountability in the management of COVID-19 resources, including donations or help that we get from multilateral partners. That's number one. And also, what is the CSO's perspective on that transparency and mechanism being put in place? And do you think that anything else needs to be done? Because as Chris has highlighted, getting the money to the right recipients at the right time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that when you look at obviously what government has done, publishing the donations, it's welcome. It's a welcome move. We hope that it will be regular, and we also have regular updates as in terms of how much has the government received, how much externally from as well as from its own sources. We expect regular feedback from the government. We also, I think I would expect to see the government publishing how it's utilizing those resources, where are the resources going towards, who are the suppliers of these resources, because I think it's important that we maintain the procurement regulations. I was surprised that we relaxed the procurement regulations. I would think that during this time where resources are limited, we need to be strict in terms of our procurement, because otherwise we will have leakages which will have unintended effects, given even our experiences in other disasters. So the expectation is to also have stricter requirements, reporting requirements from government, and also participating, to expect other stakeholders participating even in terms of what needs to be done. We expect government to be consulting more, whether it be CSOs, business, and all the other stakeholders, so that at the end of the day, we have efficient utilization of resources, especially during this time.
And of course, Parliament needs to play its role. That's the key, is it not?
Yes.
They are our, what's the word, the referee, so to speak, if I can call it that.
I think it's actually important that Parliament should be central in terms of oversight of these resources, and we need to involve all the accountability mechanism bodies, including your ZAC and other commissions, as well as even the Auditor General. I think it's important that at this particular time we have frequent audits, regular audits, so that we don't lose any resources.
And of course it builds confidence in everybody. Then I'm going to ask you two questions here. The first one, of course, is because we talk Diaspora. What has been the role of Diaspora and remittances in financing SDGs in Zimbabwe, and also in terms of investment? That's my first part. My second part is, how has those funds from diasporans contributed to local and national development in the past? And how can we leverage on that right now, particularly in the face of COVID-19?
Okay, thank you. To move on to that question, to give you a very good response. Diaspora, I mean, we need to understand who is a diasporan. or the diaspora community out there. Let's say a migrant or a Zimbabwean moves from here, goes to Botswana, South Africa, US, to settle or to be there temporary. You know, we carry with us our culture, the networks, we build networks even within our host communities. So diasporans are people from a particular descent or country that kind of come together to build a kind of network. But if you ask about the role of diaspora, I would say diaspora has a lot to play. I mean, in terms of the discussion that we're having now. If you look at diaspora, it falls within, like IOM, our operational, one of the operational areas, migration and development. Most of the times, we view migration as being negative. But within the migration and development frameworks or the discourse, what we're trying to say is the diaspora, or the people who are out there, who are maybe our own, they owe some kind of bond and ties to this country, right?
They're home.
Exactly. For example, just on the lighter note, I was traveling with some Zimbabweans outside the country, and I saw in the luggage, this is called what? Maputi.
Yes.
Maputi and some. So what are you going to do? Just 5 days. You know, this is no. I mean, this is iconic, it's right? Speaking to that, the diaspora's role, we say that they offer some kind of human capital in terms of their role to the building the nation. Why do we say human capital? People go out there, they learn skills and they gain some knowledge, you know. They come back to transfer these skills. So in terms of what we've perceived so far to be very negative, or the layman term that we usually brain drain, we tend to reverse this as a brain gain, right? People come back home with the skills that they've acquired. They also tend to transfer those skills and knowledge to people here on site. Okay, great. Then we move on to the issue of diaspora being a social capital. They move, they come back, also they acquire some kind of culture. They come and build this culture within their communities of origin. They bring it back, right? And the diaspora also serve as, they have this kind of affective capital. Like I come from a Kumusha, right? I have that kind of the affection for my local community that I want to support. I went to Bulilima Mangwe area and then talking to people. So what is this? These are people who went out there and they've come to, you know. So you see the kind of love that people have, they also tend to look back to support. Then they are also agent for local development. Like we're saying, we recently ended a project that seeks to promote migration governance in Zimbabwe. We supported some communities to also partner with their diaspora to have some social projects, social development projects, like clinics, schools, you know. So the role that diaspora plays is very key. And we are not also oblivious for the fact that they remit.
That's the key, is it not?
Exactly.
Fact, that's the main, isn't it? The remittances.
The remittances.
Over $620 million US dollars.
Yeah, and then you and I know that talking about these 17 goals that we have, the Agenda 2030, the first one is what? To make sure that we reduce poverty, or there's no poverty. And these remittances that diasporans bring, I mean, it helps in education, health and issues.
Construction.
Startup capitals for, you know. And the same thing also speaks to the fact that it helps also to bridge that kind of gender equality. Because now we see the kind of feminization of migration. More women are even moving. Do you understand?
They're moving?
Yeah, more women are on the migration trail.
Okay.
You understand? So you look at it, and it speaks to the fact that we need very good policies that can also make sure that we also address the gender aspect of migration or the diasporan issues. It's not only about men who move, women are moving as well. So that brings us to issues of policy development. So we see that the role of policy that will play in terms of diaspora issues is that the policy will serve as an enabling
but that's what diasporans have complained about, haven't they? They've said that they want to bring their money back in, they want to invest the money back home. As you said, they do have a love for their country. Zimbabweans are second to none on that. But they always complain that we don't really, the policies, we don't know what we benefit from coming back. That is an issue very quickly. We have to take a breather. But that is an issue for diasporans, is it not?
Well, I think it's an issue that has to do with information campaign or sensitization or awareness creation. I'm very sure that RBZ and other financial institutions have some packages. We know of diaspora bonds. We also have the Zimbabwean Diaspora Directorate. I mean, if they seek the information, they will know the right way or the right areas to invest, because diaspora also bring in financial capital and investment for national development. So I think all borders on how we can sell out the message to the diaspora. I mean, if you really want diaspora's contribution to national development, you need to engage them.
That's the key, isn't it?
Yes.
Communication. We always say
the trust.
But it's important.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to take a breather. Keep your thought down. We have to take a breather now. You're watching the Mint Special, Financing SDGs in the Face of Covid-19, Business and Diaspora Investment as Catalysts for Sustainable Development Goals. This is from ZTN Studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, the Poverty Reduction Forum Trust. Don't go away. The Mint Special will be right back. Welcome back to the Mint Special. Of course, we're discussing today financing SDGs in the face of COVID-19, business and diaspora investment as catalysts for sustainable development goals. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, the Poverty Reduction Forum Trust, PRFT. Chris, I want to look now at business, because the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, they call for business to apply their creativity and innovation to solve development challenges. So, of course, do you have any examples of business taking up this call, especially during this period? Are business aware of the SDGs, and are they actually incorporating them into their own business strategies?
Thank you so much. I think as Chamber of Commerce, our involvement in SDGs is beyond reproach. It's certainly beyond reproach. To maybe bring it closer home, let me push to one of the very effective, if not vibrant desks, which we run as a private sector desk, is the women desk. We realize the need for gender equality, I think, as you appreciate on the SDG 5. The women desk, we boast of not less than 1,500 women-owned businesses within the chamber structures. So you see, even when the debate on the 18 billion continues being spoken about, the question is, the bias also to balance. To us, we are aware, when you say gender, we don't necessarily refer to women, but we also have to include them, because we had seen time and again how they've been overlooked. We have so many businesses which are well-run, successful businesses, run by women. They've been disadvantaged just like the youth within the country. So as Chamber of Commerce, it's our duty. We continue promoting business-owned can I say the women-owned businesses. Then I think as Congress is coming, the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce Congress, there's one subject which has been of interest, digitization. I think for some, they're embracing technology because they didn't have an option after the whole lockdown. But we had seen it as private sector, that the only way somehow we can manage, even from a cost side, is to embrace technology, robotics, our industry. Today you talk of competitiveness. What competitiveness can you mention? One, when the currency is under pressure, Secondly, when the methods of production themselves are not efficient. You try to go to China, a same shit which would take someone the whole day to have here, in 5 minutes, they already have it. So these are efficiency issues. These are competitiveness issues. So as private sector representing Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, our involvement has been practical in trying to see that SDGs are obliged to SDGs. We comply SDGs. We also implement that. We also had been working outside the Chamber of Commerce, but also at commercial level, as you might be aware that Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce is a member of the Commercial Business Council, as a, not only a member, but it's also a board member to Commercial Business Council. The message, the gospel of SDGs, we continue preaching it, not only in Africa, not only in the world, but also at commercial level. So the implementation of the goals has been an issue to us as private sector. So certainly we can safely tell you that
businesses
we have
cease
been
with
quiet
implementing.
very much. Sometimes we even implement without knowing some of them are SDGs. I think we are seeing climate change, how droughts had been coming.
Yeah, environmental management.
Environmental
and so forth.
management, you look at the blue economy, you look at the life even under the water.
And SDG 8, economic growth as well.
You see. So we are very involved. You can't overlook private sector, business in particular.
In fact, the SDGs are supposed to be driven by business.
You see?
That's a fact of it. It
Yes.
isn't a governmental
It's
organization. It's supposed to be
private.
driven. Government is the enabler. And that's the
Absolutely.
key.
Yes.
I want to get back to Diaspora because, and Artwell, this is for you. You know, Diaspora remittances are expected to decline due to COVID-19. And that's really due to the possible unemployment that diasporans may face in their countries where they are now. So, and of course, that a lot of poor Zimbabweans, or even Zimbabweans in particular, rely on diaspora remittances just for their day-to-day needs. So, of course, if remittances decline, what would you think would be the impact on those sort of vulnerable or poorer people? In fact, everybody is receiving some of these. What would be the impact on that?
Yeah, obviously the impact is negative, and we expect to see more people who become vulnerable because of the changes in terms of income, the reduction in terms of income. Also, as people lose, some people lose jobs and come back, we also see that we have more people in the vulnerable group. So I think it's important that we don't forget that these are some of the people who have been contributing towards the development of the nation before. So as they come in their time of need as a government, there's also need to deliberately look at those who are vulnerable and assist them, so that we also, even I think as Daniel mentioned, they've gained some skills. We also need to look at ways of capacitating them so that they can also come up with business proposals and help develop the country. As even Chris mentioned, that we expect to see more inward and more inward-looking perspective. So we would want to see government coming on board, coming with deliberate policies targeted at diasporas.
I mean, it's interesting here, Daniel, because if diasporans go down, or diaspora remittances go down, there actually is there could be an impact on migration. You could find more people migrating out of the country because, of course, their sources of revenue are down. What would be the impact? Maybe you would know better as the expert.
According to the World Bank report, I think remittances are going to decrease by 20%. I mean, globally. But if we look at the sub-Saharan Africa, we're looking at a decrease of about 23%. I mean, these are projections, though. And in terms of trying to even do the reverse, it doesn't give us much, only about 4% to revamp, you know, the negative or the downward trend. I mean, remittances, you and I know very well, at least one of us here might have
Received the
yeah,
last few days.
we've been end users or maybe beneficiaries of remittances. So it's really going to have impact. And I'm very sure, and it's not on the maybe, how do you call it, it's not casting, how do you call it that word? Casting the stones, but it's so glare and then hiding the plain sight that it's going to affect all these, the Agenda 2030. Do you know the number of children who were depending on remittances? So we're going to have a resurgence of even child labor. Issues of women being vulnerable.
And trafficking, of course.
Trafficking, exactly. So we need to look at all this. I mean, I think we need to do some kind of holistic auditing of all sectors of the economy. And then look at also the migration challenges that this will pose. And that is why IOM is also available to assist the government to look at all these possible migration challenges that the COVID-19...
Look, there is one challenge. Yes. Now, of course, IOM Zimbabwe operations since 1985. You work with the government in addressing migration-related challenges and providing solutions and services in the areas of migration development, emergency and post-crisis situations to migrants and communities. The issue here, of course, is, let's look at our neighbor, just as an example, South Africa. There's estimated to be as much as 3 million Zimbabweans in South Africa. Whether they're legal or illegal is not the point. The point is, though, is that majority of them could lose their jobs due to COVID-19. Let's just assume it's just 1%. Let's assume it's 100,000 or out of 3 million, just as an example. The problem is that they are returning home. They may have to return home. So apart from the remittances that they're not producing anymore because they're not working, they also are coming home to a situation where there is no employment, there is no money. That's a migrant issue. Yes. And of course the cost for quarantining of those 100,000 as a number. How do you think that the government of Zimbabwe should deal with such a situation, in consultation, I believe, with members in Southern Africa as well?
Well, such an issue, looking at the response, you need to look at it, breaking them to the short and medium terms, and then also the long-term goals. Of course, when people come back home, they have all sorts of needs. You know, so you look at them, and then the ones that you can provide, we call it direct assistance, you go ahead and you put. Once you're looking at the direct assistance, you're also looking at viable livelihood support. These are long-term issues, of course. So you need to build in terms of your crisis response to all these. So, like I'm saying, it calls for a roundtable conference. I mean, it borders on Ministry of Women and Gender, SME, that ministry responsible, Home Affairs, Foreign Affairs. So we need to come back and sit down and see how best we can do a viable and more sustainable recovery.
But this has to happen now, because this is happening now.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, these workers are coming home.
So it should be a transient thing. We need to look at it here and now, and then look at the long-term issues. And like we were saying, I mean, the money is not there, but we then also look at mobilizing the resources, how we can fundraise together. You understand? We need to, I think it's now calls for, I was trying to say that not the whole society is sick. No?
Okay. Look, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our show, but I just want to ask the two questions, and because I know this it's around our topic today, but of course the government recently announced a moratorium on prices of certain commodities, and it has no impact. It seems to have had no impact. Prices keep rising. Now, this does have an impact on the financing side of it, because people complain that even that $200 per head, Artwell, by the time you've taken away your intermediate tax, your VAT, it's no longer $200. The question is it possible? Can moratorium rise? Business, we see prices going up, and of course, business is always used as a scapegoat, is it not? Very quickly.
I'm not sure when they say it is not having an impact. It's actually having an impact. That's why prices are moving. Prices are moving because rational businesses, they take a position when they know your behavior and they want to maximize on it. Whoever they can sell it at a higher price, then that's perfect. But let me summarize just to say we had already made submissions to the government clearly opposing that move. Whether it's moratorium or you call it price control because it's gazetted. I think it's a matter of
we've had this before, haven't we? Didn't work.
But any tampering with the market forces to find a reprieve. We've seen it in South Africa, we can't just fight. We've seen it in Mauritius also within this lockdown. But it's no justification whatsoever for it, especially given that we have a fixed exchange rate already, which is already causing problems. Because post-lockdown, you don't know how we are going to calibrate the exchange. It's already mispriced. And the whole dissonance between a fixed exchange rate, which had become so unrealistic, versus the whole price. You know what is causing the price increase.
In fact, you know what, I'd like to bring something in there as well very quickly, is that diasporans also complain about the exchange rate, don't they? Because they know the official rate is 25, and they know what the parallel street market rate is, and then, of course, that's why we find money coming into the system,
Absolutely. Right? Not only diasporans, investors, households, when the price exchange rate is there, what it means is the potential loss for everyone, including the government itself.
All right. Yeah. So business, at least, so we're looking at prices going up, but that's really based on economic fundamentals, particularly inflation, cost of doing business,
we have
supply
been clear
chains.
to say, as long as there's no clear access to forex, especially for businesses, going to the black market,
that's where prices go up.
And it's a challenge.
So unfortunately, we're coming to the end, so I have to ask you one final question. SDG 17, this is about partnerships. And I think that Daniel and even Chris have really highlighted how partnerships are vital in this. We've got the private sector, governments and civil society, inclusive partnerships built on principles and values, a shared vision, shared goals. I think that's critical. With this in mind, what is the way forward in terms of SDG financing? What kind of partnerships would you wish to see that would make that more effective?
Okay, I think from the discussion we're having, we have also heard from both Daniel and Chris how both the diasporans can contribute in terms of financing, or how they are contributing in terms of financing SDGs, as well as how the role that business is playing. So I think that we need now to have a structured way of incorporating the work that the diasporans are doing, the work that business is doing, the work that government is doing, and all the other stakeholders, so that we bring them together and we have a structured way where we know that if we're approaching this particular SDG, this is how business is going to come and help. When you're looking at this particular SDG, this is how diasporans are going to help. I also think, maybe just to add on a slightly different note, I think in terms of even when we are developing this, when the Ministry of Finance is developing the national strategy, the next development plan, I think they have to be cognizant of Section 13 of the Constitution, which talks of national development, which talks of involvement of citizens in terms of coming up with development plans and also the implementation of plans. So when we do it in this, I mentioned it earlier in the earlier program, I think it's important that when we incorporate all these aspects, we also benefit from the human capital that outside. We get ideas from the some of the experts, the expertise that our diasporans are getting outside. So we need to have a mechanism of participation where everyone can contribute towards the next development plan, so that it's not just a government thing.
I like that. I mean, I was talking here about the Zimbabwe Ministry of Finance, the National Development Strategy 1, NDS1, which is supposed to replace Transitional Stabilization Plan. Everybody needs to get involved in its compilation, so to speak, and hopefully implementation. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our program. You've been watching the Mint Special, Financing SDGs in the Face of Covid-19, Business and Diaspora Investment as Catalysts for SDGs. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, the Poverty Reduction Forum Trust, PRFT. We'd like to thank our panelists, Artwell Gonisi, Poverty Reduction Forum Trust Programs Coordinator, Daniel Sam, Project Manager and Head of the Migration and Development Unit at International Organization for Migration, and of course Chris Mugaga, Chief Executive Officer at the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, gentlemen, for appearing on the Mint Special. According to United Nations, the UN, diaspora remittances and investments are recognized as an important component in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals at both the household, that's SDGs 1 to 5, the local, SDGs 6, 7, 12 and 13, and national level, that's SDGs 8 and 10, and of course international level, SDG 17, partnerships. Therefore, helping remittance families leverage the development impact of their own resources is vital to reach the SDGs. Further, the United Nations notes that SDGs provide a unique opportunity to create a convergence between the goals of remittance families, government development objectives, private sector strategies to tap underserved markets, and the traditional role of civil society to promote positive change. Since COVID-19 is expected to have a negative impact on remittances, we stood at $635 million in 2019. There is a need for an incentive framework to tap into diaspora remittances, and more effort needs to be made to get business fully involved. Something which may not quite yet be in place fully in Zimbabwe, but something that needs to be done urgently. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and you all be safe.